You're listening to the Good Christian Podcast. We're not saying that we're always good Christians, but this is always a good podcast for Christians to listen to. I'm your host, Alex Sanfilippo. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. What's up, everybody? So excited to be back with you for another episode of the Good Christian Podcast. I recently found out that this podcast has grown by over 900% in the last 12 months. I had to log into the podcast hosting to renew it for another year. So by the way, we've got another year coming up, which I'm excited about. But when I logged in to pay it and all that, I saw the statistics. I don't usually look at them. And there's a reason for that. To me, it's not about the amount of people that are listening. It's about impacting one person's life. And that's always been the reason that I do this podcast, is because I want to help that one individual who needs it most. So for me, the statistics were kind of just out of my mind, if you will, because I knew that it was helping some people, because I always get feedback from it. Although I've realized it has been more and more people have been reaching out to me, which is really exciting. And anyway, so when I logged in, I saw that it had grown by over 900% in the last 12 months, which is crazy. So it went from low thousands of people listening to tens of thousands, which I'm really excited about. So thank you so much for listening and sharing this podcast. If you've been with me from the beginning, you've heard it change and transition quite a bit. But I do want to say thank you so much. This was actually the first podcast I ever did. So if you go back and listen to the very first one, man, I'm going to tell you probably just shouldn't, because I wouldn't go back and listen to my voice at this point. I've done so many episodes. I feel like I've gotten much better at it. But anyway, if you've been with me since the beginning, you've been leaving the reviews and sharing it, thank you so much, because I believe it's adding a lot of value to people's lives. And I greatly appreciate you being part of this with me. So as always, thank you. I love all of you for just being part of this journey with me. It's been definitely a journey in my life. So with that said, I'm going to transition to today's topic, which is going to be a little bit different than our last few episodes, which have been more personal development and goals and things like that, which makes sense. It's a new decade and it's a new year and all that. So we talked about that stuff a lot. But today we're going to get into a heavy-hitting topic. We are going to cover why it's time to stop speaking negatively about the church. Why it's time to stop speaking negatively about the church. I've realized more than ever that Christians are starting to talk bad about church, and it's becoming more acceptable in a social setting as well, where we just say things bad about our church or a church that somebody goes to, or something that we heard about, or other Christians even. And I think this is really a bad thing, and I want to get into it in today's episode. First off, the main reason being, reports are showing and stats are showing that there are less Christians in the world than ever before. There are less Christians ever before, and if that's the truth, then us talking negatively about our primary way of bringing people into Christianity, that's a problem, because it's not going to help us at all. I want you to really think about that. When you say something negative about the church, it's actually hurting us overall. It's causing us to get even smaller than we already are, and that's a problem. It's something that we have to really think about. And I want to make sure that we all have the right mindset about this. I want to talk about why we need to stop speaking negatively about the church. So to start, I'm going to just share a story of what kind of brought this whole idea on, because you probably would have gotten another personal development or spiritual growth episode if it weren't for this conversation I had. But I went to a dinner with a group of people, and it was a very diverse group of people. And when I say diverse, I mean that there were people that were Christians, both new Christians that had been around for a long time, very mature in their faith. And there was also people that were just thinking about becoming a Christian, and people that definitely don't want to be Christians. I had that whole group of people here. And, it makes for an interesting conversation. It always does. And honestly, we were having a great time. We were at dinner, we were out somewhere, and just having a good time, good conversation. And then one of the, newer Christians mentioned that he had this great experience at his church, blah, 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 kind of like went into it. It was a pretty cool story. And then immediately following it, one of the more mature Christian people, I'm doing some air quotes there, but this more mature Christian individual was very quick to talk about how going to church is a waste of time, and the church is just like ineffective and stupid now and all this. And he wasn't that harsh about it, but he was harsh enough to make the whole table listen and really start thinking about it. And obviously the people that don't want to be Christians at the table joined in immediately, like, oh yeah, you're right, that stuff's stupid, blah, 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 blah. So what I did is I just got quiet. If it was all Christians in that room, I would have definitely lashed out and kind of let this guy have it, because my blood was boiling at this point. But I didn't do that. I just got quiet and let the conversation go away and went back into another conversation. Everyone was fine. It was a fun night. But I was left thinking about that conversation. If the spiritually mature person and the person at the table who doesn't want to be a Christian agreed on something involving the church, I believe that that's a problem. Those are two extremes. They shouldn't agree with anything about the church. Again, that's the person who says, I am very close to God, I have a great relationship with him, and the other person who says, I don't want to be a Christian, I think that whole thing is dumb. When those two people agree about the church, there is a problem. And here's the deal. It causes division because in between those people, there were the new believers. They're excited about the experience of having a church. And there's also people that are thinking about becoming Christians. Or I say thinking about becoming Christians. They're just open to the idea of it. Does that help those people at all in any way? I mean, is that helpful at all? Is that productive? Is that something that's actually going to lead people closer to Jesus or further from Jesus? So I actually want to get into this topic a little bit. And I've done some prep work here. I want to share 3 things that happen when we talk bad about the church, because I believe it's going to add value to you, and it's going to help you get this bigger perspective and kind of reinforce my feelings during this story that I just shared with you that while I was at this dinner, what happened. So again, these 3 things that happen when we talk bad about the church. When we're negative about the church, these are 3 things that are happening. Number 1, it causes division. We're all called to be the body of Christ, which is more than just one church. It's all of us. It's the church as a whole. It's Christians as a whole. But when you talk bad about church, you're splitting Christianity up. You're saying that there's the church-going Christians and the non-church-going Christians. Both love Jesus. One's right, one's wrong. And you're basically saying that if you go to church, you're wrong if you're speaking negatively about it. And that's division right there. Or you've also got on a smaller level, you've got the people that are talking bad about the church that their friend goes to or they heard about, that they used to go to, all these things, and they have these negative things to say about it. That is causing division. That doesn't help anybody. Because at one point, that church you were going to was probably helpful to you. Or that church that your friend goes to, it might help them. You don't need to say anything negative or bad about it at all. I think that's going to be very counterproductive. And, actually a story about this, I was playing soccer a while back, and I went out there and I saw somebody new that I hadn't seen before. And I asked him, got to know him a little bit, asked him what he does and things like that. He mentioned he goes to church. And I said, oh, me too, I'm a Christian. So we kind of started talking about that. And he was very quick to jump into explaining why his church was the best church out there. And he didn't say that directly, but he had this kind of attitude about him like, oh, well, I go to this church, and this church is where things are really happening. And I knew he was ready for an argument. Thank God I had the discernment in that moment to not talk about my church at all. Instead, what I did was I knew people who had gone to that church. So I said, oh, I know people who go to that church. It's fantastic. I heard they're doing this, and this in the city. I know that it's really helping a lot. His mindset, his mood that he was in completely changed. He was looking for an argument to explain why his church was the greatest one out there. But instead, he was like, oh, yeah, it's really helped me too. Here's some things that it's done in my life. It's been really helpful and blah, 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 blah. We got into a good conversation about it. But initially, he was looking to cause division. He was looking for me to tell him where I went to church so he could tell me 10 reasons why my church wasn't what his was. There's nothing productive about that at all. That doesn't help anybody. What if I was a new Christian excited about finding this church, and this guy's now talking me out of going to this church? That makes Christianity get smaller, not bigger. It causes division. So that's the first thing that we have to keep in mind when we talk about the church. It causes that division. And the second thing that it does is it causes people to be silent about their experiences. Again, going back to that table of people, the person that started sharing about church to kind of open this can of worms, if you will, which he didn't expect to be opening, he was excited about learning more about God and finding community within his church for the first time. And somebody just shut him down right away and talked terrible about it. That guy is not going to be near as quick to share those experiences next time. He's not going to want to share that at a table. He's going to be quiet about it. And rightfully so, because you don't want to get beat up about it, right? But the truth is we have to be promoting people sharing their experiences at church, because that's what gets people to want to go, is when people hear the stories, when they hear me excited about something that happened in my church and they're not a Christian, like, man, wow, that sounds cool. Alex has got some great stuff going on. That sounds really positive. I could use some positivity in my life. But if us Christians are shutting other Christians down, we talk about a positive experience we had at church, that is hurting the church overall again. That's negativity that we don't need. That's completely counterproductive. It doesn't help anything or anybody at all. Now, the third thing is it breeds a negative mind. When we talk negatively about the church, it breeds a negative mind. When you talk bad about anything, it's going to breed negativity. But have you ever noticed that people that are negative about everything are also the least happy? Are you an unhappy Christian? It might be because you're talking negative about Christianity, about the church, and those different elements within them. You've got to start being positive. There's actually a famous quote that I love. I think I first heard it on the movie Bambi. I can't say it the way that I think it was the little bunny rabbit in it said it. But anyway, I can't say it like that. But anyway, the quote goes, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I think if you take one thing away from this, speaking negatively about the church, if you have something negative to say or a thought, don't say anything at all. It's better off for Christianity for you not to say anything. We have to start thinking about growing Christianity, not making it smaller, because that's really what's happening right now. Now, I know many people were saying, well, Alex, you don't understand what I've been through at my church or what they do, or that, they've been caught embezzling money, or there's been some immorality caught in it, in the leadership of it. All those things are just things. And yes, we can be negative about them. I get it. And those are bad and sad things, but it's better to not say anything than to say something. Because at the end of the day, again, talking about that, when you get around people that are new in their faith or not yet in their faith, and they hear you talking bad about the church, they're going to assume that that's all of them. We have to protect the body of Christ by speaking life about it. We have to be willing to speak positively about it and just not share those things that aren't great. Now, if you really need to warn somebody about a church they're walking into, if they're saying, I'm just not starting to go to church, you do it in love, not attacking, not negatively. Is to say, man, I had a bad experience there, because that's not how most churches operate. There's a lot of really good ones, and they have some good elements there too, but they have this big flaw right now that I think that might not make it a great fit for you, because I recommend this church to you. I'll even go with you. When you do something like that, that helps build the body of Christ, not tears it down. Instead of just being like, oh, you know what? They stole money a long time ago and they're terrible and they're not even a real church. Don't go there. Actually, don't go to any church. When we're doing things like that, that doesn't help anything. Now, you might be asking, Alex, why are you so passionate about this, and why are you sharing about this today? I know it's a different topic than we usually cover, but here's the deal. If I'm, being honest with all you guys, all that we have is the church for getting new people into the kingdom. And I mean that. Yes, I know you can become a Christian outside of a church. You can find faith anywhere. You can grow in your faith anywhere. But how often does that happen? Where did you first find Jesus? Where did you start growing in your faith? Where did these things happen for you? Where did you learn to pray, to read the Bible, to worship? Where did all this happen for you? I'm willing to bet that 95% of the people listening would say, oh, that happened at a church for me. Even if you're not going to a church anymore, that's where you started. And I believe it's our biggest opportunity in the world today is to get people into churches where they can begin growing and getting discipled. I think it's so important that we protect the church and what we say about it more than we ever have, because that's where people are going to find Jesus ultimately. The other thing that church does, if you're saying, Alex, I kind of outgrew it, and I get it. You might be a self-feeder, somebody who's just really strong in your faith. You're not really learning or growing anything there anymore. But at the end of the day, the community aspect of it is worth going alone. The community aspect of a church is worth going alone. I'll tell you what, isolated Christians are one of the most dangerous things on earth. They become negative, they fall out of their faith, but then they're dangerous because they know a lot about it. And they're the people that are bringing down Christianity more than anybody else right now, I believe. And it's because they isolate themselves. They get out of Christianity. They think they're better than the rest of us. Or, maybe they don't even think that. Maybe they just, hey, I do know everything a church is going to teach me. And yes, you can reach that point. I believe that. But you can never learn enough about community and people to say it's worth pulling myself out of church. And that's why I will always go. Yes, I'm mature in my faith. I've been a Christian for a long time, and my relationship with God is stronger than it's ever been. However, I go to church because, one, I might still learn something of an open mind, but two, the community, the people that go to it. We have to be a body of Christ, and we can't do that if we're all isolated and alone. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're not going to church, get back into one. Get into a church, even for the first time, and start building community. Start helping other people understand faith the way that you do if you really are mature in your faith. And also, ultimately, the main reason for this whole episode is to stop talking negatively about the church. We've got to be positive. So I want to encourage everybody, whenever that negative thought comes into your mind, don't say it. Speak positive. Speak life. Remember that this is our biggest opportunity in the world today to impact the unsaved people is through the church. So let's start being more positive about it. So in addition to this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I'm always looking for ways to help build the church up more. If you have ways that we can stop speaking negatively about the church and start being more positive about it, I'd love to hear from you. If you just go to podcast.dailyps.com, this will be the latest episode up and have a comment section. I'd love to have a conversation with you there about this so we can start working together to be more positive at the church and start helping Christianity grow again. So I'm excited about this episode. I know, again, it was kind of like a heavy hitter and it was a little bit more intense than most, but I believe it's going to add a lot of value. And I want to ask you to share it with people. Get the word out there about this. This one needs to be spread around because it's going to ultimately help Christianity in bigger ways than many of us can realize in just our own individual areas of influence. But at a global perspective, this is going to help a lot of people. So let's start being positive. And everybody, I'm so thankful for this podcast. I love all of you. Thank you for the encouragement that so many of you are reaching out to me to give. It really motivates me to keep on doing this. And as I continue to hear from God, I'll continue to share with you. So I'm looking forward to next month. Hope you all have a great March. Thank you again for listening to the Good Christian Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. This really helps us to continue to impact and reach more people. I'm looking forward to sharing another episode with you next month. But until then, remember that it is our calling as Christians to speak positively about the church.